Hello and welcome to Pipeline with me, Gary West. It's not often that we find ourselves talking about Hollywood film directors on this programme, but John McDonald is one such, and On the Day is a documentary feature film he made charting the coming together and subsequent performance of the Spirit of Scotland pipe band that was at the 2008 World Pipe Band Championships. Well, John was over at this year's Worlds, so I took the chance to have a word with him about the project and about the new box set, which includes the film itself, plus a number of special features and a CD comprising individual performances from some of the band members. And with a more than healthy complement of 11 gold medalists in the ranks, this makes for rather good listening. We'll be hearing from John and we'll be dipping into that collection tonight. Also on the programme we have music from Murray Henderson in the Inverness Clasp, playing the Piper's Warning to his master, and we'll be catching up on news from Campbelltown, where the Springbank Invitational Contest took place last weekend. Our first music of the evening comes from one of the competitors at the Springbank, who also happens to have been the main man behind the Spirit of Scotland pipe band, and this solo track features in that box set we'll be hearing about later. The tunes are the Clan MacCall, Lady Loudon and the Traditional Reel, and the player is Roddy MacLeod. That's Roddy MacLeod, recorded at the National Piping Centre in Glasgow, where he is, of course, director. The Clan McCall, Lady Loudon and the Traditional Reel were his tunes, and that can be found on the CD within the On the Day box set, which we'll be hearing about very shortly. And from that same compilation, here's Niall Stewart from Kyle. Both of these tunes are self-penned, the first composed for his father, Andrew M. Stewart, and the second for the head teacher of the Kyleakin Primary School in Skye, Mrs. Ray McCallum. Niall Stewart, a member of the Spirit of Scotland Pipe Band, with two of his own compositions there, Andrew M. Stewart and Mrs. Ray McCallum. And that track, incidentally, was recorded by Dougie Pincock up at the Traditional Music Centre of Excellence in Ploughton. And look out for a new joint venture between them and the West Highland College of the University of the Highlands and Islands. That's to offer courses in traditional music for adults specifically. If you live up and around the northwest of Scotland, then do look out for that launching next year. So what about the Spirit of Scotland Band itself? Well, it was an unusual project in that it was a one-off, the players getting together for the first time in the week leading up to the World Championships in 2008. On the day itself, they negotiated the morning qualifying round in Grade 1 quite comfortably, and although they didn't feature in the final prize list, they did produce some excellent music along the way. This is how they sounded in their March to Spain reel. They're led by Pipe Major Roddy MacLeod and leading drummer John Fisher, and their march was the Clan MacRae Society. The Spirit of Scotland Pipe Band in the Grade 1 final of the 2008 World Pipe Band Championships. The Clan MacRae Society was the march, composed by William Ferguson, then Dora MacLeod by Peter MacLeod Jr. and John Morrison of Assynt House, composed by Pipe Major Peter MacLeod. Well, the film featuring the band was directed by John McDonald. He's a California-based documentary filmmaker who was back at the Worlds this August with his own pipe band, the Pasadena Scots. There's not too many bandsmen who are also Hollywood film directors. So how did that come about?
I went to school at University of Southern California in the cinema school there. It has a very good reputation, and I was one of the few people back then, about 40 years ago, who made documentary films. Most people were doing mini Hollywood films and have since gone on to become Hollywood moguls. But I'm just caught in the low income bracket of documentary filmmaking, but that's always been my passion.
And this project's obviously been a major one. It's great to see on the day the story of the Spirit of Scotland Pipe Band, which was an exciting project from our point of view as pipe band fans. But how did you get involved in making a film about it?
Well, my pipe major, Jennifer Fabray, had heard about it on the Bob Dunzire discussion group, and someone actually mentioned that would make a great documentary. And then she comes to me and she says, "John, you got to make this documentary. The greatest pipers in the world are coming together in one single band. You have to go interview them." And I said, "No, I don't want to interview them. It needs to be a good story." She goes, "It is a good story. I mean, it's them coming together and practicing for 6 days." I said, "Okay, well, that all sounds good too, but where's the money to make this?" So she actually put up the initial seed money to make it. And then I raised the rest of the money from Scottish organizations and pipers and interested people from all over the world. You see a big list of credits at the end thanking people for actually raising the money to do it. And it was the perfect kind of story with a dramatic story arc and interesting characters, because they practiced for just 6 days. So I had a nice little concise period of time. There was a countdown, leading up to the 7th day. Which was a little biblical in a way too, the seventh day. And it just really was something that I became very inspired about. I told Roddy MacLeod, who led the pipe band, as long as I can get releases from everyone ahead of time, so I know that I'm going to have full reign to do whatever I want to do, he said I can guarantee that. So I got a cameraman of Scottish descent, actually Scottish born, coming over with me from LA. And I said, "You can be my cameraman and my translator in case any of those Scottish dialects get to be a little bit too hard to understand."
You didn't need subtitles in the end, though, did you?
No, I didn't. I decided not to. There's some where people might have to watch the film a few times before they catch all the lines, but I just didn't want to do the subtitles. And of course, the only subtitles are the when Ewan McCrimmon's dad, Roddy, speaks Gaelic up at the Cairn Monument. I wanted that to be in Gaelic, just so people could hear the sound of it.
Yes. Yeah. And on the day it worked well, of course, because the band qualified. Might have been awkward if they hadn't. They had to come through the morning qualifier.
That was a big, whew, I'm so glad that happened. And my cameraman came up to me and goes, "Okay, now you have a film."
Yes. Yeah. So the pressure was on for extra reasons for them, not just for their own piping and drumming.
Yes.
And of course, lots of behind the scenes things, the personal stories, the personal angles. That must have been fun and learning a lot, I would assume, about the characters involved.
Yeah, well, I phoned everyone from LA before I had an interview with every person in the band that I could reach, just to get a little bit of background information about them and kind of figure out, okay, who can I spend some time with, who has some interesting stories. And everyone has interesting stories, but I had to kind of pick and choose, and I had to actually leave some stories on the editing room floor, unfortunately. Yeah. But you have to do that to keep the story moving along.
And you're not about to release it as a box set. You have it here in front of us, and I have to say it's a beautifully made product. Can you just talk us through what's actually involved in this particular form of it?
Well, when I released the DVD 2 years ago, a lot of people would come up and say, "Is there a soundtrack for it?" And I go, "Well, the pipers in the band, a lot of them have their own solo albums." and they'd say, okay, well, we like to listen to the music. We're not necessarily visual people. So I said, well, I should really come out with a CD. And I also had a lot of footage that I had not used in the film, not so much outtakes, but just very interesting pieces that had been filmed that were really never going to be in the film, but just kind of to archive. And so I ended up with a special features bonus disc that is 3 hours long, and audio CD with 18 tracks with recordings that had not been recorded before by 10 gold medalists and a few other band members, and ends with the final medley that the band played that day. The bonus disc is really nice because I use a very little known feature of DVDs where there's an angle button on the remote control. You push the angle button and you can change to the 6 different camera angles covered by the BBC of the band. So you can watch the drummers for a while, the pipers for a while, the high angle, the steady cam, and you can just do that all day long and be your own kind of video director like Gregor Sterling of the BBC.
Absolutely. Sounds like fun. It certainly sounds like fun.
Yeah.
So where can people get a hold of it? What's the easiest way to actually see this?
Well, ondaymovie.com is my website, so I have them on my website. And also they are available at the Piping Centre in Glasgow, the College of Piping in Glasgow, and hopefully it'll get out and get into some other retail stores also. But probably the best is just to go online and look for it online.
The Spirit of Scotland pipe band with the second half of their medley from 2008. We picked them up in their slow air, leaving Friday Harbour, then Chúri a Glún ar a Bhodach, then the Rusty Gun, Glen Lyon, the Thin Man and the Grey Old Wife of Rassie. And thanks to John McDonald there for his comments. Well, the CD featuring individual members of the band, which is part of the box set, includes 2 tracks from the late Alasdair Gillies, in great form, playing to an audience at St Andrews College in Aurora, Ontario in July 2001. Here's one of them, Strathspeys and Reels, beginning with Lady Madalena Sinclair. Alasdair Gillies. That's the late and greatly missed Alasdair Gillies in action in 2001. Fine set of Strathspeys and Reels from Alasdair there. Lady Madalena Sinclair, Mrs Alex Campbell, Wiseman's Exercise, The Strathspey King, The Real King, The Morning Dew, Rakish Paddy and Kale and Pudding. You're listening to Pipeline on BBC Radio Scotland with me, Gary West, on 92 to 95 FM, 810 medium wave and also online at bbc.co.uk/Radio Scotland. Now, last weekend saw 8 of Scotland's top players head to Campbelltown in Kintyre for the annual Springbank Invitational Contest, and a very fine one it was too. Coming out on top in the overall prizes for the 7th time, and here recorded for Pipeline back in April, was Willie McCallum. Willie McCallum with two marches composed by John McClellan of Dunoon. South Hall was the first and Colonel MacLean of Ardgour. And Willie took the overall title at the Springbank Invitational Contest last Saturday. He was second in the Peabrook event, which was won by Gordon Walker. Third place went to Angus MacCall and fourth to Roddy MacLeod. The March to Spain Reel went to Stuart Liddell with Willie McCallum in second, Angus MacCall in third and Gordon Walker in fourth. And Gordon Walker also won the hornpipe and jig, although that doesn't contribute to the overall placings on the day. Stuart Liddell was second, James Murray third and Roddy MacLeod was fourth. Well, I was down there on fair and tie duties and took the chance to catch up with Willie McCallum afterwards, along with two stalwarts from the Kintyre Piping Society who run the event, Finlay Wiley and Willie McCallum Senior. I turn to Willie Senior first of all. Another enjoyable contest?
Yes, Gary, this is our 12th Springbank Invitational Piping competition, and I think every year it seems to get better and better. We had a good audience today, and that helps to stir the pipers on. They were all good. I thought they were all good anyway, and some better than others, of course, and it's a pleasure to be here and helping the society to keep this going. And as far as Springbank's concerned, they say they'll keep it going as well, so it's getting better and better every year, so all the luck to them all.
It was a great contest. My first time here, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And your son, of course, your boy, done good. Willie McCallum Jr., winner again for the 7th time, I think, Willie.
Yeah, 7 times. I didn't realise it was that number, but checked the programme, and that's great. I'm delighted today to get that, because I heard quite a lot of the competition, and I thought it was very strong. So to come out and top, well, just get the luck of the day. It was great.
You've still got that consistency. 2 seconds, and that was enough to take it. You're working hard right across the board.
Yeah, I think for these events where it's an overall, you've got to make sure that you play to the best in both. You can't. Some days it doesn't work like that. You play well in one and not so well in the other. Some days you don't play well in either. But I was quite happy today. I was happy with the pipe, and the performance kind of went the way I wanted it to. So that was happy with that.
And Finlay, of course, the Piping Society, it doesn't just do this event, it's busy all year round. What else is on the go at the moment?
Well, we try to hold piping recitals throughout the year, and obviously we have a St Andrew's night, and we also have Burns night. So we do try to encourage folk to come along to the Society's events throughout the year.
And the Society's been going for a long time. Willie Jr., I know that you always say how inspirational the whole thing was for you in your early days, all these pipers coming past regularly. Was that what set you down this road?
Yeah, I was already kind of down the road in terms of wanting to play the pipes, but when the Piping Society started up, and there's some amazing recitals here, and my dad took me along, obviously, and I sat and just sort of tried to take it all in, and I think if you can't learn from listening to the likes of John Burgess and Donald MacLeod and Donald McPherson and Hugh McCallum, then that's just a small number of the best pipers around, but it's a privilege to hear them, and it's great to be able to say you heard Donald MacLeod playing in a recital, because he was something special.
The Willie McCallums Senior and Junior, along with Finlay Wiley, and thanks to all for a great day's piping in Campbelltown. Well, Murray Henderson was at the event. He wasn't playing, but he was there supporting his daughter Faye, who was competing there for the first time. At the Northern meeting this year, history was made when the two of them competed in the clasp event. We were racking our brains to work out if two generations of the same family had ever competed in the clasp at the same time. We drew a blank on that, but do let us know if you can think of a previous pairing. Well, here's Murray's performance, which earned him 5th place, playing one of the set tunes that we haven't yet featured, this setting from the John McDonald manuscript of The Piper's Warning to His Master. Murray Henderson recorded at the Northern meeting in Inverness earlier this month. That performance of the Piper's warning to his master earned him 5th place in the clasp. And Murray won't be putting his pipes away just yet, because Colin McLellan is presenting a new event in memory of his late father, Captain John McLellan. That's on the 15th of October at the Royal Scots Club in Edinburgh. This will take the form of a competition recital and dinner involving 4 players, each performing one of John's Pibroch compositions. As well as Murray Henderson, Ian Spears will be there, along with Angus MacCall and Roddy MacLeod. Looks like a great night. We'll have more on that next week. And the final regular contests of the year happen in October. The Mod is in Benbecula on October the 15th. The World Solo Drumming Championships at Glasgow Caledonian University on the 22nd. And the Glenfiddich Championships at Blair Castle on the 29th. That's it for this week. Thanks go to Ian McInnes, my producer, and to you for your company. And we'll leave you now with a cheery tune from Stuart Liddell. It's the Cameronian Rant in jig time. Have a good week ahead, and please do enjoy your piping.